What's going on, everybody? It's Neil from 2af.com. First, thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We sure appreciate it, and it does help. Today might be a little bit of a long one. I will try hard to get through this without repeating myself too much and with having all the information trying to be relevant. Today we're going to talk about scope height, and there's a lot of different options and what those different options mean to you. There is not one right answer. There is not one right way to do it. There are some wrong ways, but there's more than one right way to do it. And even within the selection of right ways, there are consequences, right? So if you choose to do it this way, that is a right way, then you have to deal with this. And if you choose to do this way, which isn't the right way, then you have to deal with this. You might get some benefits doing it this way or doing it this way, but there's also some things you have to deal with. And we're going to talk about that today, so at least that you can make an informed decision about how you set up your gun. All right, so let's start out with standard, and also, while what I'm talking about today, I'm talking primarily about magnified optics, or optics that have some level of magnification. This is not, mounting red dots have parallels to this as well. Maybe not to the same degree, but it's not a totally separate conversation either. So keep that in mind. When all these numbers that I'm talking about, these are all, I'm going to be talking about some things that you want to try and stick towards and stuff you want to try and avoid. It's also important to mention that this is all dealing with a gun that's set up like an AR-15, right? It doesn't have to be an AR-15, but all of these numbers are when your mounting platform is relatively straight in line with where your cheek goes, right? If we're talking about another gun, like let's say an AK, where your mounting platform is up here, then your stock comes way down here and your cheek is way down here. Even the SCAR is like that a little bit. Even with the adjustable comb that you have here for your cheek, if you look at the mounting platform for the optic, the stock comes down a little bit. It's not straight like this is. So any gun that has this mounting platform here for your optics and a relatively straight place for your cheek to go, that is not perfectly in line. You can see this is down lower, but it's not way down, right? It's pretty much in line. These numbers are gonna matter. If you have a different type of gun, these numbers aren't really gonna matter in the way that I'm saying them. Also, the numbers that I'm talking about, this is not height over bore, right? This is the height of the center of your optic off of its mounting base, right? It's not off of the bore. We're not talking about height over bore again. This is the center of the optic line. The numbers are the center of the optic line off of the base of what it's mounting to, all right? So, having said all that, when you take your gun and you cheek it, you get a cheek weld. Your cheek goes on the stock. This is called the cheek weld, right? For most people, for your eye to be looking through the center of the scope, the mount is going to have to be somewhere between 1.5 inches tall and let's say like 1.57 or 1.59. Less than 1.6 is ideal for most people. And the reason that there's not a single number is because sometimes maybe your eye isn't at the same level as everybody. Maybe your cheek is a little fatter, maybe it's a little skinnier, maybe your head's a little shorter, maybe your head's a little longer. So the number can be different for it to be ideal for every individual, right? But it doesn't get that crazy. Like I said, anywhere between 1.5 and 1.9, somewhere in that area is probably ideal. So this is a standard gun, right? No risers or anything. Daniel Defense V7S with Night Force Unimount that is 1.50 inches tall. Again, that is the center of the optic mount to the base that it's mounting to. That's 1.5. All right, and when I get my cheek on the stock, My eye is looking more or less through the center of the optic. I don't get a lot of scope shadow, and the reticle is in the center of the view. Why is that important? Without getting into a discussion about what parallax is, let's just talk about the results of dealing with parallax, right? So if I'm looking through this scope and the reticle is not centered in my view, let's say the reticle is at the top right of what I'm looking at, but the reticle, the crosshair, is cutting the target that I want to see right down the center. Perfectly, the reticle is perfectly centered on my target, but the reticle is not centered in the window. You're not going to hit. It's not going to be in a different area code, right? It's not going to be like a massive miss, but depending on the size of your target, it could be a total miss. So you want to try and have the optic right behind your eye so that the reticle is in the center of your view. You want to try and avoid things like scope shadow. Scope shadow is like, right, if I have my head too far this way, right, I'm going to see just a little bit of the view through the scope, and then the rest everything is black, right? So that black that you're looking at, that's called scope shadow. You want to, what you really want to try and avoid for sure is uneven scope shadow, right? So if you have a pretty even scope shadow all the way around the center of the view and the crosshair is in the center of the optic, I mean, that is not the end of the world. In some cases, some people actually look for that. What you want to avoid is that uneven scope shadow. And a good way to help you do that is to have the optic mounted at the appropriate height. And generally speaking, that appropriate height is somewhere between 1.5 and 1.59, depending on your body style and eye shape or face shape and everything. Can you get away with mounting something higher? You know, you're like, Neil, you just sold me a 1.7 scope mount or a 1.93 scope mount. I mean, yes, you can get away with a lot of stuff. But the higher you go, the more your cheek comes off of the stock. The more your cheek comes off the stock, the more you have to spend time centering the reticle inside of your view. So you can still do it, it's just not as easy. Why is that an issue? Well, if you need to make precise shots quickly, it can be an issue. I've seen it at a bunch of different classes. We'll lead into two examples here, right? So at Kyle DeFore, his carbine classes, doesn't matter what carbine class you take, you're probably always going to do what he calls his hat qual drill. Basically, you got a B8 target. The B8 target has a black circle, which is like, I don't know, I think it's like 5.5 inches. And that target's 100 yards away. That black target's not the only scoring area, but the main scoring area that you want is about 5.5 inches. You're 100 yards away. At the buzzer, you have to drop prone, get on target, and shoot 10 rounds inside of 14 seconds. If you're over 14 seconds, it's a fail, right? Now, say you got all your shots off. Are they all in, right? You have to score a 90 or better to pass. So it's got to be at 100 yards, it's got to be 14 seconds or less, and it's got to be 90 points or better, and you pass. I mean, I can't count how many Kyle DeFore carbine classes I've been to. It's probably over 20, right? Tons of times we've seen people at class that have higher mounts and they struggle with this. While they're zeroing, right? While there's no time involved, it's no problem. You know, you can get good, solid hits. But when there's time involved and there's accuracy involved and both of them are together, it causes issues. I don't want to say that you cannot overcome them, but you got to work at it. So that's not to say if you have the appropriately mounted height scope that you're automatically going to get it. It takes more than that, but this at least sets you up for an easier attempt, right? Let's move on to another class, right? So HK, Tanadized 416. I took this to a Chuck Pressburg no-fail carbine class when I first got it set up. And so we've got a Geisley 1.54 mount, right? So sounds good, should be good to go. But man, I am having a hard time. I wasn't failing drills or anything like that, but this gun was not shooting the way that I expected it to. The reason was I neglected to take into consideration that this mounting platform is higher than a regular AR-15. I don't know if you can see it here, but this little scoop that comes up, so down here, this is where your normal Picatinny rail would be on a regular AR-15. On the HK series of guns, you can see it comes up higher. I don't know how high it is, but I think it's pretty close to a ½ an inch. So now, with a 1.54 mount, and this mounting area that is about a ½ inch higher, I'm at probably 2 inches or better. So now this scope is 2 inches or more. And I'm trying to cheek the gun, right? Get my cheek weld. And I'm looking literally, I can't see through the scope at all. The whole entire view through the scope, it's just scope shadow, right? I'm looking basically here. My eye is here. It needs to be here. So for the whole class, I'm lifting my head. I'm lifting my head up, and there's nothing solid to connect to, right? And so my head's moving around a little bit, and I'm inducing parallax. And this gun, which is typically going to be capable, let's say just about any of your ARs. I mean, two MOA is kind of on the high end of what you should get. Most guns can be capable of better, especially if you're using good ammo. I'm shooting like 3.5 MOA. I'm like, this sucks, right? My group is centered. In fact, I remember clearly I had a really centered group, so my score was still pretty good. There was a guy right next to me. He was shooting lights out, but he was low and to the right. So with my 3 MOA gun, I'm still scoring somewhere around a 90, you know, but he had 10 shots in the 7, right? So he had like a 70. His 10 shots were like this. My 10 shots were like this, right? But they were centered. One thing leads to another. I know this gun is capable of better, right? The gun is capable, the ammo is capable, I have good equipment. What was wrong? Well, the scope was higher than was ideal for my eye. Bought a cheek riser after that class, right? This is the Sun and Shadow cheek riser. This is the old one. I'll show a new one a little bit later. They come in different heights. This is the 0.5 model. So now this puts my head around where it should be. And now my head's looking right through the center. I've got a cheek weld, consistent place to lay my head, rest my cheek, and my eye's looking right through the center of the scope, and I'm seeing the crosshair right in the center. Took it out to zeroed again, ran some drills. We're right back down to about probably 1.5 MOA, and that's with just ball ammo. So the equipment, again, we want to stay somewhere around 1.5. This mounting area with this 1.54 mount, but now the stock was lower than normal. Well, it's not the stock was lower than normal, but the mounting area was higher than normal, which put my cheek lower than where it should have been, right? So I got to make up the difference. The cheek riser does that and gets my head right where it should be again. So even though this is, compared to here, this is now about 0.2 something, the cheek riser makes up the difference, and I'm back down to about like 1.5 something, whatever it is. Another time we see this. So this is the first scope gun I ever built. Mark 12 Motto. Had this gun since about 2002. When you build these guns, this is the ARMS 38 SPR, or this one's actually the PEQ rail. When you build these guns, you use this PEC rail. It's a 1/2 inch riser, and you use arms number 22 medium rings. Now, arms number 22 medium rings are about 1.15 inches tall. So that 1.15 with the 1/2 inch riser, I'm at about 1.6, right? So, or 1.65, somewhere right around there. Now, that's not terrible. It's not as bad as 2.0 or 2.04, whatever it is, or 2. Whatever. But when I get my cheek weld, right, I've got a little bit of scope shadow. All I got to do is lift up there. I don't know if you can see that difference, right? Here is my cheek weld is looking good, right? I got scope shadow. All I got to do is lift my head up that much, and I'm right in the center. So here, not real good. Here, very good. But again, 1/2 inch riser, 1.15 inch rings. I'm in that 1.6 territory, which is a little tall, but not terrible. Say you build a Mark 12 Mod O. What rings do you have to use? Not arms number 22 medium like the Mod O. Why are there different rings? Because the Mod O does not have that 1/2 inch riser. So number 22 high rings, these are about 1.45, right? So a little skinnier. Now, cheek weld, I'm looking right through the center, right? So this is pretty good right here. Lower rings with a riser, higher rings without a riser. It's not the end of the world, but tons of times I'll see people building Mark 12 Mod O's, right? And they will use a regular one-piece scope mount. Regular one-piece scope mounts that are designed for ARs, they're 1.5 inches tall, roughly. They're putting it on top of a 0.5 inch riser, and now they got a 2-inch scope height or more. And they go to the range, and they're like, man, you know, this gun's not as accurate as I thought. This is kind of an expensive gun. I'm using match ammo. My scope is good. What's the problem? Well, you've probably got the wrong setup. Could be other things as well, right? But these are capable guns, right? Set it up right. Get that scope somewhere around 1.5, 1.54, 1.57, something like that, over the top of your mounting area, so that when your cheek goes on the stock, your eye will be centered and looking through the center of the scope, and you're not fighting parallax. Mark 12 Mod H. A lot of these use the PRI recce rail. When you use the PRI recce rail, the traditional rings you see used with these are the arms number 22 mediums again. Again, those rings are 1.15 inches tall because you're using a 1/2 inch riser, and you're not getting too crazy off of that 1.5-ish height that you're looking for. Some Mod H's don't use the rail. I chose not to use it when I built mine, primarily just to save weight. And so I use the standard LaRue SPR mount. These SPR mounts, if you've been following along, taking notes, these are 1.5 inches tall. I think they're 1.50 right on the dot. I could be wrong about that, but needless to say, they're 1.5 something. And again, puts my cheek goes on the stock, eye is right behind the scope, reticle is right in the center of the glass, which is what I'm looking for. A couple more guns here, right? So NSW recce, right? Regular flat top rail. Uses the Night Force Ultra rings that are available in a number of different heights. The height that they recommend for the AR-15, I think these are the extra highs. Never mind the extra, whatever it is. Just look for the height. These are 1.5 inches tall. So, cheeks on the stock. Reticle is right at eye level. Reticle is in the center of the scope. Don't really see scope shadow. It's looking good. Here's another thing that we're starting to see. This isn't new. People have been mounting red dots to the tops or the sides like you saw on the Mod H. But right now, let's talk about mounting to the top, like a 12 o'clock mounted red dot. Right now, it's at 1.5, which is, as we're talking about, somewhere around being ideal for most people. All right, so now with this red dot, this is not ideal. It's good to have it, but this is higher. So looking right through the center, man, I gotta lift my head. There's a dot. I gotta lift my head way off of here. Now this is a backup red dot. I'm not saying that I don't need precision, but I probably don't expect as much precision out of this as I do this. Imagine if I was using a 1.9 mount and the scope was 1.97, right, off of your mounting platform. This, you're looking at probably almost 3 inches now. Your head's gonna have to be like way up here to see it. Not only does that present issues with getting a good solid zero, or a zero that is good at numerous distances, it's also difficult to deal with parallax. And parallax, like I mentioned, is an issue for red dots as well. It's not as magnified as your magnified scopes, but it exists. It's there for sure. Pat Mack class, you go to any of his carbine classes, he usually does a drill where on purpose he will have you zero in on a target and then shoot it with the red dot at the 12 o'clock, at the 3 o'clock, at the 6 o'clock, and at the 9 o'clock inside of your window, and you'll see. Some red dots are better with it than others, but it exists in all of them. Some of them just mitigate it a little bit better than others, but exists in all of them. That's important to say again. So anyway, NSW Recce, Night Force 2.5 to 10 with 1.5 rings, right? Makes sense? Same scope, same rings. Why do I want a riser? Well, we're back to another HK 416, right? So this is a 416 Recce. Again, your platform is about a ½ inch taller, roughly, than a normal AR-15. So even though this optic setup is exactly the same, minus the Dr. optic, even though the optic setup is exactly the same as the gun that I just saw, on the 416, it sits up a little higher. There's another sun and shadow scope riser. Again, this is the ½ inch model. I like these because these are the new models. These are the Gen 2s. They're available in 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, and I think 1.0 heights. The 0.75 and 1.0 heights, they have a little bit of storage in the center that you can put batteries and things like that. Another thing that I like about these, aside from the fact that they're different heights available, there's also plenty of different colors and camo available. They work on not every single stock on the market, but this will work on most of your most popular model stocks. And on top of that, the new models have this super industrial strength adhesive that's on the Velcro, and you have a lot more control over where the riser goes. Some risers that are out there, they clip on here and they're only in the rear or they're only in the front. Maybe you need them someplace in between. With these sun and shadow ones, you have a lot more control over where this goes. If you shoot with your head back a little bit more, put the riser back a little bit more. I usually shoot with my head forward a little bit more, so I have my riser a little bit further forward. Cheeks on the stock, eyes looking through the center of the optic, reticle is in the center of what I see. That's what I'm looking for. So again, same optic, slightly different gun, you might have to use a riser. I think that's really all I got for you today. I think I used all these different guns as examples. So why would you want to use, right? So let's say 416, let's take the riser off. We've got a 1.54 mount, but on a riser that's about a ½ inch taller than your normal AR. So we're at about a 1.9. Why would you want this? Why do some people use those tall mounts? Well, some people like to shoot with their head up a little bit more instead of down. I just said earlier, I like to kind of put my head down. Some people like to have their head up. You might be a little bit more mobile. You might be a little bit more fluid with your head up like this. So it does help in those instances. I think high mounts are pretty okay if you have a red dot. I think high mounts are pretty okay if you have a low power variable. I never like to say never, but I don't think that I would ever use a high mount, like a 1.7 or a 1.93 or something like that, on a higher magnified optic. I really, short of a different gun or a different scenario or something like that, I don't think I'd really ever use that. And if you do, like let's say you want to get over your laser, you want that scope to be over your laser or something like that, I would definitely use a cheek riser at that point to keep my cheek on a solid cheek weld, looking through the center of the optic, minimizing parallax issues. So, all right, that's really all I got for you today. I'm sorry if this was long. I'm sorry if we talked about a lot, but man, I see this all the time, and I see people struggle with it all the time. If you just understand it, if you just understand what you want to achieve and how to get there, you can do it. If you don't know why you're having problems, this could be part of the reason. So again, I hope the information was good for you. I hope I can help. Reach out anytime. Again, it's Neil at 2af.com. Sun and shadow cheek risers, these scopes, these mounts, all these things are on 2af.com. While you're there checking them out, get signed up for email notifications. We really just send about 1 or 2 emails off a week, and it just gives you an idea of what's going on around the warehouse, what's coming into the warehouse, what's going out of the warehouse, etc. If you want to get these Recce tees, just go to brands, and the first brand you'll see under the number sign is 2AF. Look in there, you'll see all the 5.5 stitch branded t-shirts and stickers and stuff like that. If I can help with anything, Neil at 2af.com. You can text 904-593-6922. You can message me on any one of these social media platforms. I'm always happy to help in any way that I can. All right, everybody, take care. And again, thanks for watching.